Hello, I'm Soycat, and for the first time in the country's history, the United States just launched missiles against the Iranian mainland, and this is a very major escalation of a conflict that had been brewing for some time, but has now entered the kind of active warfare stage. They have literally launched missiles on another country's territory, asking the question, which is, why would they choose to do this? What did the US and Iran disagree on so much that it can only be resolved with missiles? But also, there's the more major question of how did they do this? I mean, this is the US, and they just struck targets underground on the other side of the world. And then there's the question of what does this mean for Trump's Nobel Peace Prize odds? Well, let's go into that today, and let's start with the major first thing. Why does the United States dislike Iran so much right now? And the simplest answer to that is that Iran has been seeking nuclear weapons for some time. In fact, the target for their strike was Fordo, and a uranium enrichment plant hidden in a remote mountainside that is vital to Iran's nuclear ambitions. It's worth mentioning that, officially speaking, Iran says that they just want to use this nuclear material to have nuclear reactors, and that is a very technically valid thing. You can just enrich uranium and use it solely for nuclear power, which is a very useful form of energy. However, once you have nuclear power, it's a bit easier to make the jump to nuclear weapons, and given that we really restrict who is allowed to have nuclear weapons, that is something that is a big problem. The only 5 countries that were ever officially allowed nukes were what you could broadly describe as the winners of World War II, the United States, UK, France, I mean, win's a bit of a stretch there, but Russia and China are the only 5 countries officially allowed nukes. However, Israel, it doesn't confirm or deny that they have nukes, but they heavily imply they do. North Korea really implies that they do, but we're not that sure on exactly how many. And India and Pakistan have had such big conflicts with each other that they decided they both needed nukes. And so, as you can see, the number of nuclear states has massively expanded, and this represents a major problem. And so the reason the US does not like the idea of Iran getting nuclear weapons, it's not just for some theoretical late-game conflict, it's because of the fact that Iran having nuclear weapons would allow them to engage in the same mutually assured destruction games that basically allow North Korea to do more or less whatever they want. The same is true, arguably, for Pakistan, India, and Israel. And if you don't like what a country is up to, and I don't think anyone, even most Iranians, like what Iran is up to, then that is something that represents a bit of a problem, I guess we could say politely. And so Iran having nuclear weapons is a bit scary. Add in the fact that they are big on, I think state-sponsored terrorism is a strong word, but they finance a lot of non-state militant actors in some very spicy situations. So if they were to have nuclear weapons, maybe they accidentally give some to another group, and this would represent almost certainty, because every country knows that if you activate nukes, you are over. But if you're a non-country group, you could get away with it a bit more, especially if you've got a target that's very, very nukeable. And so, as far as you are concerned as a militant group. And so Iran having nuclear weapons is a major problem, directly and indirectly. And so what has the US done? Well, they've struck the Iranian nuclear sites, and what's crazy about this is if you look into the, I don't know, I think once you get into the actual how of military situations, it's wild. They just flew their own planes over Iranian territory, not officially allowed, and then they dropped a bomb on Iranian territory, very much not allowed. I think this is a concern, especially about declaring war. And then they put a missile deep into the ground so it could detonate underground, deep below the surface, 60 meters in fact. And this allows them to destroy things that are very well hidden, deliberately being put in a place where they can't be bombed. And so the US just bomb places that can't be bombed, which is impressive, I guess you could say. The logistics of the how and why is very interesting, and even more interesting in my opinion is the fact that this is a huge gamble for Donald Trump. Not just in the fact that he is a president that has claimed that he wants to keep America out of new conflicts, despite literally being, how many months are we into a term and starting a new conflict? But even more interesting is the idea that he did actually say there was a plan to give Iran 2 weeks to actually back down from this, and they chose not to do precisely that. Iran has always been something of an exception to Trump's non-interventionist mantra, because he said towards the end of his first term that he launched a high-stakes military operation to assassinate Iran's military commander in Iraq. This was hugely controversial at the time, and it's just as controversial as the strikes right now. Basically, the US agrees, like many other countries do, that you really shouldn't just attack countries randomly. There needs to be some warning, or at least, at the very minimum, you shouldn't attack people in third countries that you're not at war with. And so this represents a huge problem for Iran, because now, even though the US has not declared any mini war, and even though the US is not officially attending to anything else, if you actually look into the response here, the US has just said, like, okay, we've done what we wanted to do, we've destroyed the nuclear facilities we think are important, and now it's all dependent on how the Iranian regime reacts. If you want to do nothing about this, then that's entirely fine with us. However, Iran also did, you could describe not near nothing, but, you know, like, not very much in response to their major nuclear leaders being, being attacked by missiles recently by Israel. And obviously, there's the US actively attacking them in Iraq in 2020. There is a bit of a problem for Iran, which is basically that in the same way they treat the world of hostility, the US is trying to have just a mild program of every few years we're going to do something to kind of mess you up until you agree to peace on our terms. There was a deal put in place before Trump, but Trump did not like that deal. The deal would have still allowed Iran to have nuclear power and therefore easier access along the path to nuclear weapons, and so this represents a major problem. So now here's the question, what is Iran going to do? The goal, if you are the United States right now, is that Iran does nothing. The reason this is a gamble for the presidency is because Trump has said he's not starting any new wars, and if this is just some strikes on Iran, it's a pure win with nothing, no downsides behind it. If Iran goes, okay, we really don't like that you did that, but I don't want to start a war, great. However, here are the choices that Iran actually has. The first thing that they could do is they could choose to attack the tens of thousands of US troops deployed in the Middle East, and they've made it clear that it's they are going to attack these. That's what they said before the strikes, and so any one of these US military bases, yes, the US has a lot of military bases in the Middle East, but any one of these bases could be a target, and so in particular, if you look at Iran, the very closest of these are in Kuwait, Bahrain, and Qatar, or maybe you could argue the UAE, but any one of these countries, therefore, could be seeing their US bases be attacked, but that is risky because it directly involves attacking another country. I mean, is it attacking the US or is it attacking Bahrain, for example? When you attack the US base in Bahrain, the answer is very messy, and I guess it depends on who you are and whether you want to go to war or not, and so Iran has that as one of its choices. The second choice is that they could choose to close the Strait of Hormuz. So as you might know, the reason the Middle East is such a crucial region to many parts of the world is because they have a ridiculous percent of the world's oil reserves, and so if Iran closes the Strait of Hormuz, which just to show you on Google Maps what it says it is, right here is the strait. It's a very short area that you could easily just say, no ships going in or out. You would affect about a third of the world's oil supply, because here is the UAE, here is Qatar, which is more natural gas, but whatever. Here is Bahrain, and here is Kuwait. As you can see, it represents just a bit of a struggle when you take so many of these countries and say, yep, until you improve relations, we're gonna, cut things off that way. And so that is their choice number 2. Well, their choice number 3 could just be, how about we do nothing? If you are the Iranian leader, you have a huge thing on your hands, which is that if you let your country be attacked and do nothing, you look weak. If you let your country be attacked and you do something major, attack thousands of, civilians of another country, not civilians, military people are exactly the opposite of civilians. But if you attack thousands of military personnel of the other country, you know that it is the most powerful military in the world, and so you got this problem of how much can you poke the bear with the stick and justify that that is just making us even, while the US is out here saying, look, we're even now, anything you do now, we're going to attack you 10 times more. This is the fun kind of war games of modern warfare, and it's why there is a huge struggle on the line. As you can see, there are many headlines that say that Trump is taking a huge gamble. Basically, he could start himself into a huge, he could begin another US conflict in the region, the exact thing that he said he didn't want to do. He wanted to be a peacemaker, he wanted to get the US out of the wars, and indeed, this is something that has got him nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize from debatable circumstances, but if he actively starts a war, then that seems like the opposite. There is an argument that this is the peacemaker move because you are actively depriving Iran of the ability to nuke their neighbors via state and non-state actors, but I think ultimately there is a huge struggle on the line of I guess put it this way. In a democracy, you know that war is always going to be unpopular. Even the Iraq War, which like had every, like defense behind it, was still pretty unpopular at the time. It was like 50% of people supported, 30% of people did not. And even then, that was like a limited intervention. Iraq became the poison chalice that has doomed many a government. And the same is true for basically any war that's going to be far away from home. I think that this is a huge problem that I think any US president has, which is that doing anything in the Middle East, even if you think it's right or important, is going to be unpopular, which is something, therefore, in particular Iran knows, that like, oh yeah, if you want to strike us, you're also having a strike to your domestic political game. And so basically, Trump elected himself on a platform of, I'm not going to do any military strikes, making Iran feel safe, and therefore then going against it. Basically treating democracy in the game of what do you say you do before you're elected, not as a game of, oh yeah, you should say what you're going to do and be honest with the people, but instead by saying, aha, I just said that I was going to be peaceful to get elected so that I could get you when you least expect it, which is great from a game theory perspective. Like, if Iran genuinely did not suspect that the US could get involved in a war, it's a great move to do that. But it's also a bit of a mess for the idea of democracy, that your leader might get elected on a platform that is the opposite of what they want to do, just because they know the enemy are watching what they say. And indeed, a lot of people might not have voted for a president that actively said, yes, I am going to strike Iran, I am going to start a conflict that might end up with some US service personnel being dead, might end up with oil prices being massively increased, but that is a price that I am willing to pay. Because even if it's the right move, and this is the messy question that depends on what you think about Middle Eastern politics, whether it's the right move or not kind of is a different question to whether it's a popular move, which it almost certainly is not, unless Iran chooses not to respond. If Iran does not hit back, if Iran does precisely nothing of this style, then that is the preferred option for basically everyone, besides this guy who then looks weak. I mean, look at how sad he looks already. Let's just really take a look at that face. Do you think that he wants to, look like the supreme leader? That is his actual title, by the way. But do you think he wants to look like the supreme leader that said, yeah, actually, I don't think we can risk more of our people dying. It's the correct move, but it's, in the Middle East, which is very much a place with politics of revenge above all else, it's not the right move domestically, politically for him. So will he make the right move on a game theory front or the right move politically? There's the question. And I also want to make sure that we don't dismiss the idea that not only did people die in this strike, I mean, people working on a nuclear program, but they might have believed it was a peaceful nuclear program, who's to say, but also this represents a major evacuation of Tehran, as their major city has been told that it will in fact be bombed. There's a huge problem on the line for, I guess, like, humans, which is something that I think we should always say at the bottom of this. It sucks for Iranian people. It also sucks for the US service personnel that are, basically being used as collateral chips, knowing that their lives will, if their lives are lost, it is used as justification to throw more lives into a conflict. But I guess that is part of being a soldier and or living in a state that has a supreme leader that it wants to develop nuclear weapons. It sucks sometimes, huh? But speaking of things that suck, should we look around Iran on Google Maps? Do you think they've got, hey, we got something in here. This is Iran. It's looking pretty good, actually. Yeah, if it weren't against the visa conditions of basically every other major country, I think going to Iran would be pretty cool. I bet right now the prices... Anyway, the important thing to say here is that I hope you all enjoyed this video. I hope you found it interesting, because I'm going to see you in the next one. Oh, actually, no. I've got one last thing. So I wanted to make a thumbnail for this video, right? I'm gonna have like a proper one made by Naito, who works on the thumbnails for this channel, uses country balls. But in the meantime, I was thinking of just doing this: a missile, the US Iranian like flag thing, and then having a missile. But I'm not sure which way makes more sense. Is the nuclear missile being pointed from Iran at the US, because that's what they want to one day do, or do we flip it and say, actually, if we transform this, flip this horizontally, is it the US threatening missile strikes on Iran? I mean, yeah, I guess we need to take off the nuclear part of this missile. Maybe I should put my face there instead. But anyway, I hope I'll see what people click more, the real thumbnail or this one that just has a nuke aimed on it. And I wonder if we reversed it, if we get, I want to know the answer about which way this missile should face. And I also would like to know if you enjoyed this video, because it's over now. Second channel, don't care. And I hope that we resolve things in the way that kills the fewest people, if I can have a controversial opinion at the end here. Anyway, yeah, see you next time. Oh, and be safe. Goodbye.